Week 4 featured our first double-digit win of 2026 in the Rhode Island Legacy Leagues. We're going to break down the other two games that were much closer again. So we're 5 for 6 in 2026 of very, very close games with good finishes. And it was the good guys, Maya's favorite team, the Halfway Crooks. She's back, pulling off that 13-point win with no subs. We will talk about that game last because we have to save the best for last when, the host does some things on a basketball court for the first time in the winter 2026 season. But Matt and Maya standing by. We're going to break down week 4, get to week 5. We're kind of at that halfway point of the season, so I'll put them on the spot. And we're going to talk about some defensive players with one of our sponsors, Defusco Fence. We're going to have them sponsor a segment later, but don't forget about Ultra Barber Salon, the official barbershop of the Legacy Leagues. I've been teasing them all season, but you see them on the jerseys. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up and a lot more partnerships too. I have one. I don't want to jump the gun, but you guys have been complaining about the floor not, being a little slippery, which is normal for a gym. We got you covered. So we got some stuff on the way to help with that. So stay tuned for that. Let's get to the week 4 post-game show and our analysts ready to break down all the action from week 4.
Yeah, this is the Legacy League. Tell me what will your legacy be? Yeah.
Technical difficulties. It's okay. We're here, the week 4 post-game show. Maya and Matt standing by, the theme song, and it was the Halfway Crooks, it was the Air Mambas, and it was the Road Dogs all getting wins in week 4. Let's jump into it. One of my least favorite sayings, but let's do it. Let's start with that first game because it was one of the most, anticipated coming in with the Road Dogs and Lob City. Lob City losers of 2 straight coming in. The Road Dogs undefeated, just coming off of that win over the Halfway Crooks the week before, and it is the Road Dogs 65-64 getting the win. It was back and forth. It was close. Then it kind of looked like the Road Dogs were going to get the win. I'll throw it over to Matt and Maya a little more quickly here before we do some of the stats, but Lob City hit some threes. Elijah Brown made it very interesting, and then I'm pretty sure Lob City had a chance to win it when we kind of thought it was, just finishing out the game and kind of going through the motions. We're like, uh-oh. They might steal this one because, like I've said, Cody Crawford's notorious. It ain't over. It's never over, and just because of how some of the free throw stuff works and how fast you can kind of make up some ground. Lob City almost did it. They didn't, and they fall to 1-3 where the Road Dogs remain unbeaten at 4-0. Maya returns to the show. So does Matt. I know we had we kind of keep rotating our analysts, which is great. We get a lot of different, viewpoints here. But Maya, the Road Dogs get it done. You can go wherever you'd like, and then we'll kind of hone in on that fourth quarter. But what'd you like from the Road Dogs and Lob City with 2 teams? Before I throw it to you, my sayings come true. One of the things you'll hear a lot is a race to 60, a race to 65 because of the playoffs. It kind of picks up that defensive intensity. And I told you the score, 65-64. So kind of talk about that defense and maybe the difference. These teams aren't going to be scoring in the 80s when it's like this, right? When it's 2 teams like this, locking in, every possession matters. What'd you see, Maya?
Yeah, the defense in this game was big, and I think the Road Dogs is just a good way to find a way to win. The other games, they have success with hitting shots and getting out in transition and playing fast, throwing the lobs to Ennis and all that. So this game, the shots weren't falling like, they're probably used to. So I think they were able to lock in on defense. It helped that Lob City also only had 4 players available, right? So some tired legs for Lob City in those first, I want to say 3 quarters. They kind of picked it up in the fourth to make it interesting. But for the Road Dogs, this is just a game you escape with. You didn't shoot the best, but you played defense and you honed in, and that's what helps you win moving forward in the season when, teams, they start to lock in and you play stiffer competition as the season goes on.
Lob City is no stranger to not having any subs, and so if any team was going to be used to kind of how this goes and how long the game is and how you kind of have to save some energy, they're definitely up for it. We talked about Elijah Brown with 25 and 5 3-pointers. Cody Crawford, I thought he was better than 4 of 15. I think early he hit some, and we were like, oh, here we go. He finishes 4 of 15 from 3 with 16 points and 9 of 32 for Lob City from 3. And yet it was a 1-point game. And it really, I'll get to Matt after I go over the Road Dog stats. 9 for 32 for Lob City. At least 3 of those threes were in the final 2 minutes, right? When they were trying to come back. I can picture 3. It might have been more. And so that means you're looking at 6 for 29 throughout the first, 38 minutes of the game, which is not, close to where you want to be if you're any team, especially Lob City. For the Road Dogs, Noah James leads the way with 22, Kevin Views with 17, Demoy Ennis with 16, and Karan Bostic with 10. They only had 5 players. They shoot 63% from the floor. They actually lose the rebounding edge. Both teams had 18 defensive rebounds, more offensive rebounds for Lob City, and only 5 of 14 from 3 for the Road Dogs. So just kind of some of the big picture stuff. They weren't even taking a lot of threes. And it kind of goes to that game where it's a little slower. You're kind of executing a little more, and the Road Dogs trying to, like Maya said, take advantage of some of that interior presence that they felt they had an advantage of. And we'll see. These teams play again. Again, I say it every week. Whoever did the schedule did a good job. So at least we'll get to see this matchup again, hopefully with some more bodies for both teams. But Matt, you've seen these teams play. They're different this season. So the first time they're playing this season, but especially that fourth quarter, it was definitely close throughout, and it had that feel of a playoff game throughout. But then in the fourth quarter, the never say never Lob City almost came back and pulled it off, Matt.
I think Lob City, especially compared to the team that, I saw play during the summer, was very different. There's a lot of parts that are kind of new, and I think to some degree they're still figuring out, how those things work together. I saw a lot of really good things that I think are improving. And I think at the beginning of the game, for that reason, they start off slow. But I mean, it's Lob City. You can't count them out in the fourth quarter, as you said. They're going to be there in the big games. And I think that definitely came to play towards the end of the game. On the other end, the Road Dogs, I think, you have a bunch of those players from the Skyhawks in the summer combining with some of those players, that were also on the Road Dogs that I saw play. And there's kind of a very easy kind of fitting in going on there. I think Kevin Views and Noah work really, really well together. I think Karan Bostic fits in really, really well in this iteration of the two teams. And I think they've, with Omar going down with an injury, I think they've had to find sort of another guy to replace him, so to speak. Not that you can replace sort of what he does, but I think, especially I noticed this, I saw this game, that I think Noah has realized if you toss it up to Dom in the paint, not only is he very difficult to defend, just the angle in which he takes the basket, the height that he gets, but he'll punish you. He'll punish the person that comes up to defend him. And I think they've realized that you give him the ball like that. Right now he's easy for 18 points a game right now, just because he's just, so many aspects of what he does are difficult to stop. So I just think the Road Dogs are in a really good place. They play a really good full game, and that's tough. Even if you're our Lob City and you're going to be there in the end, you have to play 60 minutes right now against that team.
Two things and a lot of really good points. Let's give Lob City a little credit, and I think there was a couple times that I can remember where they were able to stop, kind of, Q on those alley-oops. You can't stop them all, right? But I think they had some of the size to do a decent job, whether it's preventing that pass, kind of meeting them at the rim. I can picture a few times where it wasn't just an automatic 2 points, and that's a win, right? And anytime it's not just an easy alley-oop, I think you take that if you're the other team, because of how athletic, Dom is. And, what I was going to say, your point about Omar, you definitely can't replace him, right? And for a team like the Road Dogs that let's not forget about Ethan Austin as well, right? So you kind of add in those two players with everything else. It's almost better for a team like that with so many options to have less players there, right? It allows Kevin Views to get in more of a rhythm. It allows Noah James to get in more of a rhythm because they have to play more. You never want to see players get hurt, but even in past seasons when the Road Dogs had all of these options, when some of those guys weren't available for whatever reason on a given week, things kind of seem to fit better, right? You mentioned Karan Bostic, and he gets more minutes in a game like this when there's less subs, right? And it's just kind of the one basketball theory. I think, some of those things kind of worked out for the Road Dogs. You want to have as many good players as you can. That's not what I'm saying, but they fit, like you said, and we kind of saw that fit coming together against this Lob City team in week 4. These teams will play again to close out the regular season, literally the last game of week 8. So that'll be a fun way to kind of get ready for the playoffs, because that'll feel like a playoff game, that's for sure, especially with Lob City falling to 1-3, and up next for them is Rags, and so we'll talk about that team, still looking for their first win. Not necessarily going to be easy for Lob City, but Lob City's like, all right, let's get back on track here, and then they'll take on the Halfway Crooks, Load Management again, and the Road Dogs. So it doesn't get any easier for Lob City, is my point, as they try to right this ship. And for the Road Dogs next week, they will take on the Air Mambas, who, as we get to our second game, this is called a transition, by the way, one of my favorite things. The Air Mambas hold on against Load Management, and it's some familiar faces leading the way for the Air Mambas, as they are one of 2 teams. Let's get this right. They are one of 2 teams that find themselves at 3-1. For the Air Mambas, they win 76-73. I know the interview, we talked to Shaq Colon, who led the way with 30 for the Air Mambas, and kind of the way I think about this game is the Air Mambas, it was another close game. The Air Mambas kind of looked like the better team for most of it, and despite that, Load Management had a shot to tie it, which is not ideal when you're kind of in control the whole game, and you're like, uh-oh, if this goes in, things can get a little weird here. And so that's a credit to Load Management, who was able to, win the fourth. Well, they kind of won the second half, that's for sure. 34-24 in the second half for Load Management, able to kind of fix some things after the Air Mambas came out hot in that first quarter, led by Shaq Colon with 30 and 8, Chris Vincenzo with 15, and Steve Simone with 10, 11-25 from 3, and we've talked about it a lot. It's funny, even in a low rim league, kind of that 3-point number sometimes tells the story of the game. Field goal percentage will as well, 55% for the Air Mambas and 48% for Load Management, but they'll take 11 for 25 from 3. Matt, you can start with the Air Mambas, and Shaq Colon has come on really during this 3-game winning streak for the Air Mambas. That first game, I think he was kind of trying to figure out exactly how to fit in this team, how to fit and play in this league. I'll get his stats ready to kind of give you the 3-game recap, but a 30-point performance from him, and he is leading this team, and is a huge part of this team as the Air Mambas get to 3-1.
It's my turn. Okay. No, I actually I wrote down some stats for this one, but you mentioned Shaq Colon. I think you can look across the leaderboard and find that he shows up in most of the stats. I think he's first in blocks, first in defensive rebounds, tops in points per game, scoring a lot of points, shooting the 3 really, really well. He's an obvious candidate sticking out for, the MVP consideration right now, even as someone who's, started out in the league. But I mean, they have several players who are doing really well. Chris Vincenzo, first in overall rebounds, first in assists, tied for second in steals. I felt like over the summer, I think I've mentioned this before, I think the biggest thing for them is they've really got size now playing in their way. I know Shaq plays a little bit off. I mean, he can go to the basket and he can put it in. He does a little bit more shooting as far as that. Maybe that's just my photography and how that shows up. But they've added some real size, I think, in the winter, and I think that's made a big difference. They always have Steve, he can shoot. And, they have Mario, Chris Fague, and, Chris Vincenzo. In addition to all the things I mentioned, they can score. They're a real threat right now.
Yeah, in second place, I guess technically third place because of the tiebreaker. But we're going to throw out that week 1 because in week 2, when they started this winning streak, Shaq Colon had 27. And then in week 3, he had 30 against Lob City when the Air Mambas won that game. And we just talked about how he had 30 in week 4. So my math isn't good, and I did just use a calculator, but he's averaging 29 points a game since week 1. And so I think, that's kind of probably where he has to be against these teams that the Air Mambas are battling with for them to be in these games, right? And I know that we have exact examples of that now. 30 against Lob City, they get the win. 30 against load management, they're able to pull out the win, right? And so I'm interested to see as the season goes on. There's so much stuff to watch. I want to see a game where he maybe scores 20 and the Air Mambas still get the win against, maybe if they play load management again, when they play the halfway crooks again, when they play a Lob City. That'll kind of be something I'm watching as a benchmark for this team, where if they can do that, that kind of takes him to another level. Because right now it's like Shaq's leading the way, and that's not a shot at anybody else, but he's kind of carrying that offense. Steve Simone with 17, Chris Vincenzo with 12, everyone else underneath that. In the playoffs, a team will sell out to be like, look, Shaq's not beating us, right? Like this is not happening. He's not getting 30. So like now let's see what they do. And if they can solve that riddle before the playoffs, I think that's a big step for this team as they get ready to make a run. I mean, that's what we're looking at now. Let's get back to the correct game for load management, and then we'll get to Maya. Rodney Theodore with 23, 11 of 17. He was effective. Leonard Williams with 19 and 8. Some of his athleticism coming through, and he's starting to make an impact, in a lot of different places. Almar Sabat with 18 and really took more of a back seat, only 6 shot attempts for him. And so, 4 of 25 from 3 will be kind of what stands out from this game for load management. The rebounds were just about even. Offensive rebounds were even. Assists was 17-14 for load management. So Maya, what was the key? I mean, besides not making as many shots, right? That's the easy answer. But what did load management not do? And kind of what did the Mambas do to get this one, to get this win by 3 points?
Yeah, I think piggybacking off of kind of what you were talking about, I think what helped load management get back into this game was pressing up on Shaq Colon. He had a big second quarter, and I think after that they were kind of like, okay, no more. And I think their defensive intensity and paying attention to him and selling out to stop him really helped them get back into the game. They did a full court press that had the Air Mambas a little shaken. So I think in the first half, it was just Shaq Colon couldn't miss. It's simply, I think, what it comes down to. I think that second quarter, I think going into halftime, they had a 13-point lead, and then the Air Mambas, and then after that, they locked in on defense and said, we got to make someone else beat us, and they were able to come back and make it a 1-point, 2-point game. So I think that first half really hurt them, and in the second half, they kind of slowed down. They played defense. They moved the ball really well to get good, efficient shots. They couldn't hit the 3, but I think, in my opinion, they had a lot of good looks that just weren't falling. But what they focused on is defense. And in the future and in playoff games, defense will win you the game. So I think, although no one likes to lose, this is a game where, look, moral victories, but this is an encouraging loss. You locked in on defense and you lost by 1 point, shooting 16% from 3. Like, that's not going to happen too much, and your Almar only takes 6 shots, to only lose by 1. This has to be a somewhat encouraging loss if you had to take away a victory for a load management.
Well, and you talk about that ball pressure, right? It's a great point, and how that kind of flipped the game. And so when the Air Mambas next week take on the Road Dogs in what is another huge game, right? 3-1 versus 4-0. I would expect the Road Dogs to maybe put a little more pressure on earlier. They're probably not going to wait till halftime, right? And that's kind of my point. When the Road Dogs do that, because they're smart and they're going to be able to see it just like load management did, and maybe adjust a little more quickly now that we have some data on this team, right? How Shaq Colon kind of is so far leading them. What happens at that point, right? We kind of saw load management was able to win that second half by 10 points, kind of putting on some of that pressure on everybody, picking up and kind of using their depth. Well, the Road Dogs are going to do that as well. And then they'll have some rim protection behind them, right? So even if you kind of beat that press, Q's back there waiting for you, right? And Z, who had a ton of blocks in week 4. And so every team is different, but we'll see how. I'm excited for that game, especially. Every game has been close and it's been a lot of fun. Air Mambas Road Dogs is a huge game for the two teams, and then also for kind of what you guys both talked about, where let's see what happens when maybe, or even one of those games where Shaq just doesn't have it, right? That maybe he's missing shots he would normally make for whatever reason. How does this team respond? That's going to be huge. And for load management next week, They take on the Halfway Crooks. I believe this is one of the last weeks where teams who haven't played each other are playing. And so it's kind of that last new matchup that we'll see for all these teams. And so, load management played, we talked about it, right? They played Lob City as tough as you can in your first game in the Legacy Leagues. They lost to the Road Dogs by 4, and they beat Rags by 2. I mean, so every team is right there. So it's going to be interesting against the Halfway Crooks for load management in week 5. All right, we took enough time. Damn it, let's do it. Halfway Crooks get the win with 4 players. I'll let you guys go over the stats. This is going to be fun. I'm excited for this one. The Crooks get the win. It was a 13-point win, 97-84. We talked about it, only 4 players for the Halfway Crooks. Notably, no David DePina, Aiden Dozos, Tyler Sicione, Jared Hansen. For Rags, no Joe Secator, no Brandon Taylor, who's made some shots, no Kyle Secator. And so they only had 5 players as well. And so, both, it felt like more for Rags. I don't know. Oh, no, they had 6. All right, I was going to say, it felt like they had a couple more subs over there, and I was jealous of that as a member of the Halfway Crooks who had to play the whole game. But 15 of 24 from 3 for the Halfway Crooks. We've talked about it the entire show. I mean, that's, 63%. That's what you're looking for. And even despite that, it was Rags by 8 at halftime. And it took a 28-14 third quarter without subs for the Halfway Crooks to kind of flip it. And then they won the fourth quarter and finished the deal. I'll kind of tell you what I've already thought about from this game after. And we'll do some stats after. Maya, it's only right we start with you. She's got both hands back on the steering wheel. Got the Halfway Crooks hat on now. She's got, she's ready to go. How did they do it with a, limited, and some players, stepping up for the Halfway Crooks to get the win and also be that other team that is 3-1?
Yeah, going into the game, I won't lie. I saw the 4 players versus their 6. I said, this is going to be a tough one for the Halfway Crooks. But, Joey stepped up with big threes. I mean, just 3 after 3. And Nick, he facilitated the game so well with a balance of attacking and then attacking with the intent to kick out to an open shooter like Joey that helped him get going. And so I think this game I think they did a good job of calming down in the second half. I think Nick had like 5 turnovers at halftime. It finished with only 2 after half. So it was just good job taking care of the ball. I think taking care of the ball is what helped them come back from this 8-point deficit they had going into halftime. And the Rags, I don't know. They didn't have an answer for just Nick, who can get to the rim. He can shoot. The big man, sorry, I'm blanking on his name. Aiden, just big in the paint. Just no one could be down there to oppose him. So I just think it was just an overwhelming matchup for the Rags as the time went on. And Halfway Crooks, this is a game where you expect them to lose and they find a way to win. And I think that's really impressive, for players having to play the whole game and you come out with a double-digit victory.
It was some keys there. So Aiden Viveros with 22 and 11. The biggest guy playing the biggest, right? Being the most physical player on the court helps. Terrence Gallo, 4 for 4 from the floor and 11 assists, right? And so he's able to kind of also facilitate for this team. Last season's MVP, Nick Lemoyne, 37 points, 8 rebounds, 9 assists. And then if I'm not, 10 of 15, it's not going to happen often for me, but that's the formula, right? If you're going to make a ton of threes, and then when Rags kind of switches their defense, which I'll get into in a second after we hear Matt say more good things about the Halfway Crooks, then it kind of shifts and you have to play a different defensive style if you're Rags. Richard Hall, 8 of 15 from 3. 5 or 6 of those came in that first quarter and definitely in that first half. I mean, he could not miss early and was a big part of their 37 points in the first quarter. I mean, it was both teams couldn't miss in that first quarter. So shout out to him, a big game. Josh Perry back for the first time this season, 8 of 17, and so he's usually a little more effective than that, but 21 from him, 5 assists, and was kind of back to facilitating everything. 17 of 41 from 3. Listen, Rags made some threes too. They probably, would have liked to make more because they took more, taking 41 compared to only 24 for the Halfway Crooks. At that point you want to make more, and they had some open ones. But they made a ton, and they definitely kept it close. The Crooks won the rebounding battle 30-19. 22 assists for the halfway Crooks to just 9 for Rags. And so just some keys to point out there. Matt, I told you kind of have to say some good things about the halfway Crooks now, so keep it going.
No, I think if I had to say what the story of the game was, it kind of centered around injuries for me. Nick's been talking the last few weeks about his hands been bothering him, and I felt like this was the week that he kind of woke up, and he was kind of back to the MVP player, that we saw over the summer. And I mean, when Joey Zocco scores 30, I mean, he's a former 20-point scorer in legacy leagues. He can you give him open shots, he'll make them. So that's difficult to deal with for a full game. But Josh Perry showed up, looked like he was ready to go. To me, that was a little bit surprising. I was like, "You ready to go tonight?" He's like, "Yeah, I got to try it out." And I think that's kind of what the game was for him. He started off, playing the Josh Perry style, getting everyone involved, and going really fast, going to the basket, and he can shoot. I think by the end of the game, he was just tired. I think he was beat. I think he pushed himself a little bit more than I think he would admit that he was quite ready for. And I think when he got tired, Rags got tired. I think that was a big part of it.
Well, yeah, you could feel it in the fourth quarter, and I think part of that was defensively. And so Rags, looking at some of the matchups, and they probably could have went man a little earlier and been fine, and they would have gave up some different things, right? They might have gave up a little more down low, but probably not as many threes if you go man. And they started in a zone that let myself, Nick, everybody kind of hit some shots and get into a rhythm. And then when they shifted, by the time, the third quarter came around, they did go man. I think that kind of wore them down a little more. And then at that point, I think I had 8 or 9 already at that point, and then Nick was able to kind of take over and finish the game more one-on-one than having to attack a zone, right? And that was kind of the shift. And so the shooting was able to carry the Crooks kind of throughout the first 3 quarters, and then the MVP finished the deal. And that was the goal. We couldn't have drew it up any better in the sense of like, let's get the game to the fourth quarter close, and then Nick can kind of take over and see if they can stop him more one-on-one, knowing they can't leave some shooters, around the perimeter for Rags. And that's the formula, right? And then it was just kind of Nick finishing the deal at the basket, which is awesome. Those are easier shots, and kind of putting the finishing touches for the halfway Crooks. Yeah, Nick's definitely still not 100%, but, I think we all kind of knew coming into this one, here we are, right? Like, let's give it what we got and see how it goes. And yeah, 15 of 21 from him, 5 of 6 from 3. 8 rebounds, 9 assists. I stole the graphic from him this week on Instagram. It had to happen. I'm sorry, Nick, but that's an impressive game from him. 37, 8, and 9. I almost didn't do it, but I had to. It doesn't happen often where everything's going in, and those games are fun, as I'm sure you can imagine. You could throw anything up, and stuff's just going in left and right. That's like Rag's worst nightmare when you see only 4 players show up for the halfway Crooks. The Crooks get to 3-1. Next week, we talked about it. They take on Load Management. They then finish with a rematch against Lob City, the Road Dogs again, and the Air Mambas again. So those top teams are all going to play each other again, which is kind of the best part of this season. I expect a lot of those records in the middle to probably be the same, and I think everyone's going to kind of come back to the middle because of how even the teams are. For Rags, we talked about it. They get Lob City next week, the last team they haven't played. They then get the Road Dogs again, the Air Mambas again, and Load Management to finish out the season. So some good ones there for them. If they can get all their players back, I kind of like their chances as well. All right, at the halfway point, I'm going to put them on the spot. Presented by DeFusco and Son Fence. It's going to be the DeFusco D-Fence IV team or player so far this season. See, they build fences. You get it? Defense, all right? So your player, your team, we kind of talked about it, and Maya teased it. So one of the nominees could be Load Management and some of that ball pressure we saw in week 4 and how they were able to pick up the defense and flip the game. I don't expect you to talk about me in this segment. We're kind of going a little rogue. We'll do something like big picture right after this, but kind of your standout team defensively, your standout player defensively, just anything defense. We talk a lot about the scoring, and we do bring up defense. It's going to be very important as we get to the playoffs and as these games kind of ratchet up some of those matchups and kind of some of the key defenders these teams have. I'll put Matt, who's done a couple more of these, on the spot first. All right, you can go team, you can go player, you can go wherever you'd like. Who's been your standout defensive, fence is the key word there, defensive player or team so far this season?
I'm going to go player, and I'm going to say for some of the things I've already mentioned, I just think Shaq Cologne leading the league in defensive rebounds, leading in blocks. I think that's the solid choice I would go with. It's easy to look at offensive stats and think of, at the end of the year and think about, the value of players, and especially in the award season and stuff like that. But those are the numbers that jump off the screen, as far as contributing on the defensive end. So I'd have to go that way.
All right, Maya, who is your DeFusco defensive team or player so far through week 4?
I'm gonna go Dom Ennis for the Road Dogs. I think his presence, he averages 1.7 blocks a game, and I think it's just not like the numbers. His presence makes people think about coming into the paint or shooting it high off the backboard. I think his presence down there in the paint really helps the Road Dogs defense when they like to gamble for steals, or in the backcourt, in the front court. It doesn't matter. But when you have someone whose presence kind of makes people second guess, that's really valuable. So he's my defensive player so far this season.
Well, yeah, and how many shots has he affected? It's kind of like the Victor Wembanyama thing, right? Dikembe Mutombo throwback. Like, how many shots has he affected that weren't blocks, but were missed because he was trying to block it, right? And so, or he was around, and it kind of throws off the offensive player. So I love it. 2 good nominees. All right, through week 4, it's only fitting, and I'll kind of go through the records really quick. But the Road Dogs 4-0. We have the Air Mambas and Halfway Crooks both at 3-1. We have Lob City and Load Management at 1-3, but Lob City would technically have the tiebreaker, which is head-to-head first. And they did beat Load Management in week 1, and Rags 1 game behind at 0-4. So still a lot of movement to happen. Every team will make the playoffs, okay? And so the top 2 teams will kind of get a bye to the semis. So that means 3 will play 6, 4 will play 5 in our quarterfinals. And so I guess let's do this. Which 2 teams, okay, because remember, like, Road Dogs play Lob City again, Halfway Crooks plays Lob again, and the Road Dogs and the Air Mambas. So really, a lot can still happen. Which 2 teams do you expect to finish 1-2 in the standings 4 weeks from now? Okay, and so really, it could be any team, probably Rags and Load Management and Lob. It'll get a little tricky. They probably need some help to kind of fully climb up there to the 2 seed. But which 2 teams, Maya first this time, because you're just picking 2 teams. Which 2 teams do you expect to finish top 2 and kind of get those buys as we look ahead a little bit for the rest of the season?
I'm going to go with the Halfway Crooks and the Road Dogs for sure.
How come?
They're just my 2 teams that I think can win any type of game, and that really is going to help them finish in these top 2 seeds. So the Halfway Crooks, they have a lot of players that can take over a game, as you can see. And the Road Dogs, I already spoke about it earlier, they just find ways to win. I think they can win a low scoring, they can win high scoring, and when you can do that, you can win just about any game in this league.
All right, she went chalk. The 2 teams that are currently there expected to stay there, and I'm sure the Air Mambas, who are kind of the next threat, right, just based on they already have 3 wins, I'm sure they have something to say about that. Matt, are you gonna go Mambas? Are you gonna start some stuff around here and kick one of the 2 teams up there out? Which 2 teams do you have, Matt?
I have the Road Dogs finishing number 1. I just think everyone on the team slots in really nicely. They've got some interesting X factors. Something that I think that is flying under the radar a little bit with the Road Dogs is I know Noah and the Skyhawks, they won in Rhode Island in the summer, but Noah did lose in the finals in Mass. And we know, Kevin Views has a history of, in some of the other leagues of getting the finals and not quite getting there. So that, going number 1, making it all the way in the playoffs means an interesting thing to different players on that team. But I just think they've got so much going for them right now. And that leads me into, I think the part of the question you're more interested in. I think it's really, really close. I'd have to go halfway crooks. I think, I think for Nick, the hand thing is more of a confidence thing. And I think I don't want to forget, just because I've seen him sort of take a little bit of a back seat. I'm sorry, Nick, you've taken a little bit of back seat the last couple weeks. I think once he gets that confidence back, we're going to see that, and he's just going to add to, the Sissionis and, Aiden and all the other things. There's some really good pieces. I mean, Joey Zocco can shoot. There's a lot of really good things going on for that team too, in a lot of ways, and it's kind of a quiet statement game last week by the halfway crooks, playing down.
I tried to. Yeah, I was gonna say I was trying to be loud. Damn it! I made 10 threes.
And you can't forget, the pull of having Joey Zocco on the bench, pulling the strings, the puppet master over there.
Yeah.
No, I that's my long way to saying I think the halfway crooks will eventually be there at the second, but I think it'll be a hard. I think the Air Mambas will be clawing and scratching the entire way.
Well, and it's better to be right than to just be different, right? So I commend you both on that. Like, you want to actually say what you think. Kind of the case for the Air Mambas or, a Lob City. Well, Lob City is going to play a difficult schedule as well, but the kind of those remaining games, and there is 4 remaining games, but, not that it's easy for anybody. But the Air Mambas will get load management. They'll get Rags, Road Dogs, and Crooks. So, that's kind of maybe where it's a little different, right? The remaining schedule we can start to look at, and maybe that gives the Air Mambas an edge. They would get the halfway crooks again, and they might be in a tie with the halfway crooks, and so it may come down to that last week for that 2 seed if the Road Dogs kind of continue what they're doing. But I'm excited. I think it's gonna. We'll see if the Road Dogs can finish this off. That's a tough first 4 games, right? To be 4-0, usually it's like, oh, that team, probably gonna go undefeated. Like, book it now. We'll see you in the playoffs. Let's figure it out later. They beat Rags week 1, and then it was, a 4-point win over load management, and they beat the halfway crooks by 2, and that's a little even deceiving because they were in control, if you remember, with 2 big runs in that game, and so they'll play the crooks again. But then that Lob City game was a 1-point game, so for them to be undefeated, is a feat, right? And they kind of get to own that. We'll see if they can do it again and put another 4-0 streak together to cap off the season. Yeah, those buys are huge, right? And I kind of like having those buys. It maybe won't ultimately matter, and we may see the 4 best teams get to the semifinals anyway. You can figure out who you think the 4 best teams are, and that can change too. Not having to play and not having to run the risk of possibly getting a Lob City in a 4-5, right? We're like, oh crap, now we have to start the playoffs with Lob City. That stinks. We're like, we shouldn't even really be here. That's what's at stake, right? You don't even want to run the risk. Some people can't make it. We've seen it all, right? Injuries happen, and now you have to play in the quarterfinals instead of getting that bye. Buys are always huge. We see it all the time. Buys are always huge. All right, halfway through the season. It's flying now. Now we're good. Now we're rolling. Matt and Maya, good job. This was a great show. A lot of halfway crooks coming up. This is how I like it. All right, we're going to keep this going in the future. Stay tuned for the power rankings. We'll see if anything changes. I don't know. I don't know if anything's going to really change. We'll see. We might have some happy Air Mambas on social media this week in the power rankings. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. Stay tuned for top plays, and we'll be back for week 5 on Sunday. I don't even know the date. This Sunday. You know where you're going. Week 5 coming up, and the last time teams will play a team for the first time will be in week 5, and then we'll get some of these rematches to close out the season. Matt and Maya, good job. And everybody, thanks for watching the Week 4 postgame show.